what's up you guys? Marty Schwartz here, and I've got a killer Jimi Hendrix style lesson coming at you. But real quick, before we jump in, I gotta tell you about something super cool from my friends at D'Addario. They just launched Player's Choice, a custom string builder where you can design your own string sets all the way down to the label. Seriously, you choose the gauges, the alloy, name your set, save it for reorders, all that good stuff. So I thought, well shoot, let's make something Hendrix inspired, right? I put together these Marty Hendrix custom sets because a lot of people don't know this, but Hendrix actually used his own custom gauges. He didn't play a standard set. He used a light top, lighter bottom setup. 10, 13, 15 on the top for those silky bends, and 26, 32, 38 on the bottom for thick rhythm tone. So if you're trying to get that vibe, that sound, that feel Hendrix had, these strings might be a cool place to start. Again, it's called Player's Choice by D'Addario. No minimums, totally personalized. And you can even name your set something wild. I don't know, the Voodoo Vibes? That's yours now. All right, let's get into this Hendrix lesson, and I'll show you some tricks to make your guitar cry like Jimi Hendrix. Let's go. Hey, what's up you guys? Marty Schwartz here with Marty Music, and I'm gonna show you 3 little embellishment ideas that will immediately sound like Hendrix. And I know you guys are gonna dig it. Also, don't forget, I do have an Inspired by Hendrix course at martymusic.com as well, which has multiple hours of stuff just like this that I'm gonna show you. So let's get to it. Okay, I'm gonna show 3 different chord embellishment devices that are in the style of Hendrix. You know, Hendrix didn't even invent these, but he made, he used these in really famous songs. So the first one is the one I call the Hendrix major chord. And it's really a chord inversion. And if in modern times, a lot of guitar lessons talk about the caged method. This would actually come from the G shape. But I'm gonna play a C major chord with the A shape. So I have and also Hendrix tunes down a half step. I'm in standard tuning right now just to make this an easy lesson. You don't have to retune your guitar. But if I have a C major chord right here, that's an A shape. So I've got the root on the 3rd fret A string. And then just like, that would be like the capo, and then I'm playing with one finger in A shape. If that's A, that would be B flat. This would be B. And then a half step up, it would be C. So that's a classic C major chord. I've got the C in the bass of the chord. So the lowest note of the chord is a C note. But the other notes of a C major chord, for instance, are C, G, and C again for this voicing, and then E. So C, E, and G are the notes of a C major chord. No matter where you are on the guitar, if you play a C note, a G note, and an E note in any order, those are the notes of a C major chord. Just to prove it, I'm going to play a regular old open C. And there's no note in here that's not a C, G, or an E. And I'm going to prove it right now. C, E, G, C, and E. If I play this one, I'm playing 6 strings, but that just means some of those C's, G's, and E's are repeating. So I'm going to prove it again. C, G, C, E, G, and C. So if you start to learn the 3 notes of a major chord or a minor chord, you can go anywhere on the guitar and start to find those notes. So if I went all the way up here, I got a G. Remember I said G is one of them? There's a C right there. And then where could I find an E? Well, right here. So that's a C major chord. And there's a G right there. So let's see if I went. That's a C major, or here, or here, or here. So where I'm going with that is the Hendrix major chord, which is a combination, if we play C major, and we're in this little zone, I usually find it still by knowing where the root is to how I locate it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to play one of those other notes as the lowest note, and that would be called an inversion. So if I just take this part of the chord, so I just bar across that 5th fret, D, G, and B, my closest other note, which would be a G or an E, is right here. It's an E. So 7th fret A string, right there. And so that is still a C major chord. And I'm finding it by like, either I can see the root here, C, or I can see the root here, C, and then I can form that shape. When I first learned it, I just saw this chord and then went like that, because that's still that part of it. But what you get by doing that, if you bar across, all the way across there in the A string across, you can hammer that note. So you immediately get a little musical element instead of going. Instead, now I have ideas. And so the other thing I just did there was, I have all these other kind of color tones. If I bar that, I can add the whole step G string, or the D string, or the A string, and when I hit that A string, it sounds resolved like a C chord. And depending on the other chords of the progression, you actually have this sus4 a half step up here. So that is the Hendrix major chord. But watch, if I play that for C major, I can start to do the math, and if I want to play G major that way, a G major chord, I find that, so it'd be up here. And all the same ideas work. Then if I start to be curious and use my brain, which can be hard sometimes, but D major chords right here, I can do the same idea there. So he does it right there for the little part of Little Wing. And the reason I said C, G, D is because it's the circle of fifths, which is also the chords of Hey Joe. C, G, D, and A, and then E. So it's just moving around the neck really well to help kind of navigate the concept. So if I instead of went C, G, D, A, E, which by the way, I'm finding the root on the A string. I've played for over 30 years, so I just have learned this along the way. I didn't sit and memorize it in one sitting, but I know it well now. C, G, D, A, E. So I just use that new inversion for each of those chords. Then if I want to add some of those other color embellishments, other embellishments along the way. You might say to yourself, that has a familiar sound. Well, the Red Hot Chili Peppers used that. John Frusciante specifically used all those ideas. He loved Hendrix, and and Hendrix learned a lot of that from Curtis Mayfield. So, like I said, it's a language that people pick up on from their favorite stuff. And so that is just an amazing concept. You can immediately take a more boring chord and do stuff like that. And in Don't Let Me Down by the Beatles is using that idea. So just to point out some other ideas. Okay, so I'm going to go back to C major, and I'm going to play the E root C major. Well, another kind of just idea like that is if you see that chord, instead of doing that, you can do this. In any combination, but the idea is you just cover where that root is, you cover the 8th fret high E and B, hammer on a whole step up on the B string. And that alone you can do, so watch. So that's already a really cool idea instead of playing a C chord. But I can do this. And my hand switches before I play anything. And so now my middle finger goes to that B string. And my index is now covering a half step lower on the 7th fret. And then I'm hammering up a whole step on the G string with just those 2 strings. Then I'm grabbing the root with my pinky, so that's 10th fret D. And then going back to that 9th fret G string. Now you could keep your pinky and go. But I tend not to do that. I'm usually playing with other musicians and they're playing the bass for me, so I can just do this and it's easier. So that's found by the high E root. So if I went C, G, D, A, and E, C, G, D, A could be here, E up here. Now, if you know the 2 that I showed you, then you can combine them, C to G. Pretty cool. All right, so the final one, I'm going to go back to C. It's based on this, but we're going to cover So the more you learn these, then you combine them together. So I can see this C chord, and I can just cover the 3rd fret, high E and B, and hammer on the 5th fret B there. And then I'm just hitting that root on the 5th fret G. Now if I just play this, that's a C major chord, and I'll prove it. G, E, and C. Remember I said C, E, and G are the 3 notes of C major? I could add that because that's a G again. C again. I could even put an E in the bass. Now that's a weird inversion, playing such a low E in a C major chord, but it's in You Somebody by Kings of Leon. He goes. So there's an example of it. So now for C major, we have this. So you can also add that sus4 right here, which would be the 5th fret B string. G, D, A, E. All right, I hope you guys dug that lesson. Thank you again for hanging out. Also, don't forget, I've got a bunch of great resources at my website, martymusic.com, including an inspired by Hendrix. So it's a ton of killer techniques like the 3 that I just showed you here. So I appreciate that support, and I hope to see you again real soon. See you later.